Hello and welcome to Stay for Dinner, a podcast of cooking, curiosity, and conversation. If you love cooking, hate cooking, have no idea how you even feel about cooking because you've never tried it before, congratulations, you are in the right place. Did I say this already? I'm DC Pierson. I'm a comedian, author, enthusiastic home cook. Did I say that thing that I normally say? If I did, then I'll just be cutting this part out anyway. And if I didn't, I've said it now. And later on in the show, my guest is going to be Nikki Palumbo. Nikki is an incredible New York City-based stand-up. She has also written a bunch of essays, including one that's coming up here pretty soon in The New Yorker, which is incredible. And most importantly, she is a funny, warm, awesome to talk to, awesome to listen to individual. I had such a great time with her. I think you're really going to enjoy our conversation. And before you do that, I hope you will enjoy the process of me making the thing I'm going to make today, which is preserved lemons. That's right. This is not a meal or even an entree. This is just a thing. It's an element. It is, I think most importantly, something that if you wanted to, you could make and like give away for a little nice, little thoughtful holiday thing. I think it's always nice to have a little holiday thing to give away. I guess I'm just describing a gift, right? There's no need for me to invent new ways to say a gift, but you know, just like a little something sometimes is nice, like a homemade thing. And this is a really nice one of those because it's not necessarily a sweet, which obviously that's great, but it can sometimes be maybe overrepresented. This is something that you could give somebody. They could, you know, have it on the shelf for a while, just look at it. It looks nice. It kind of looks like, I don't want to generalize here, but if your mom was like anything like my mom, you would have a lot of just kind of like, just cool looking little like jars of things that maybe it's decorative and maybe you use it, but either way, it looks neat and just, you know, kind of brightens up the kitchen, even if you never use it. And if you do use it, it's great. Preserved lemon is awesome. I am working off a recipe specifically from New York Times cooking section. It is originally a Paula Wolfert recipe. I guess she wrote a book in the 70s about Moroccan food, and it's adapted by Julia Moskin. And I guess in the original recipe, she had all kinds of more sort of like warming spices, very Moroccan. And then this one is simplified to just more be kind of general pickling spices, or you can probably honestly just do it with literally just salt. That's what, when Haley's done preserved stuff before, she's done like preserved Buddha's hand, and I think she's just used literally salt. This time I'm going to use all the stuff because, again, I think more than anything, I think it'll just look cool in the jar. And so first off, quick check of my ingredients. This is the full battery of what it calls for in the actual printed recipe. I'm probably going to be scaling this down a little bit, but 9 organic lemons, kosher salt, 1 heaping teaspoon of black peppercorns, and 2 bay leaves. And that's it. I'm going to start with 3 lemons, and I have a little bon maman. I don't speak French, so I don't know exactly how you say it. Like jar sitting around. If you ever get that kind of jam, the jars are great. They look great. You can use them as a glass to drink out of. And the jars just look cool. So I have one of those jars here, and I am going to be using that. I was seeing somebody say in the recipe, if you're like super duper serious about wanting to keep these and use them for the longest period of time, it seems like this might be something to take into account. I guess it was saying that a metal lidded jar can sometimes be corroded by the lemon juice or the brine, which kind of makes sense to me. In this case, I'm going, well, I'll probably use these, or maybe we'll end up giving this away. I'm not sure exactly. So I'm going with the advantage of having the jar over having it be like a perfectly preservable jar for years to come. That's what I'm going with. Your mileage may vary. And also I would just say, as a general note, with anything pickled or that you're going to put in a jar, I'm not an expert at any of that stuff. I know that, you know, having things be like clean and not like botulism is like super important. I don't know if that's a huge concern here. Just something to keep in mind. I'm just saying that as a giant caveat that I know with like cleaning or I know with like putting stuff in jars and laying it up, that it's supposed to be, you know, just as clean and sanitary as possible because you don't want to lock anything into the jar that's going to be gross. Everything I have here is clean to the best of my knowledge, and I just scrubbed the lemons. So we're gonna go with it from there. Everything else is you're on your own recognizance. So the first step, it says to scrub 3 to 5 lemons. I scrubbed 3 lemons, like I said, enough to fit snugly in a medium jar with a tight-fitting lid. And she says to have 2 to 4 more ready on the side. We'll see. I have more if I need them, but I'm going to try to just do 3 because I think that's all I'll really need for this jar. And then she says to slice almost quarter the lemons. It says to basically cut into them from one stem end to the other, almost as though you're going to quarter them, but you're not going to cut all the way through the other stem end and actually separate it. So it's kind of going to stay together. It's almost like I'm making like a little flower bud shape. Ultimately making 2 cuts into a cross. It's almost like if you've ever seen, I don't know what I'm even referencing here, but if you've ever seen in like some movie where they're like cutting into one end of a bullet to like make it more lethal. I feel like they do this kind of thing, but I'm cutting way more into it. So making like a cross cut, like I'm cutting it into quarters, but I'm not cutting all the way through at the other stem end. As it says, leaving them attached at one end. It's kind of cool. I like that. It says to rub kosher salt over the cut surfaces. This is one reason I was looking forward to this recipe, is because rubbing salt on stuff is really fun. And I have Morton's kosher salt right now. I kind of prefer Crystal because it's more, it's easier to work with. It's not as, this is like coarse kosher salt, so it's really big flakes. It's fine, it's not ideal. It's what they had at the store. So I'm kind of just working salt into there as much as possible. But again, it's not fully coming apart, so I can't super get in there perfectly. That's okay. But there's just something really fun and indulgent feeling anytime you get to work with just like a ton of salt at once. It says to cover the bottom of the jar with more kosher salt. Doing that, fill all the lemons in, breaking them apart if necessary. We'll see what happens with that. Sprinkling salt on each layer. Yeah, so it kind of is already, just put 1 lemon in there and it's already feeling like quite a bit. So, and I think the idea is that ultimately we're gonna really be pressing down quite a bit. So I just put 1 lemon in there, gonna top that with kosher salt. Oh yeah, that's fun. It's like snow. Very seasonal. Also, citrus is really good this time of year. So I think that's another good, fun reason to do this right now. It says rub kosher salt over the cut surfaces, then reshape the fruit. I was never really unshaping it that much. Pick up some spare salt here. Got another lemon in the jar. Gonna top that with more salt and then put the final one in, or maybe I'll have room for another one after I press down. Because then it says to press the lemons down to release their juices. And they are kind of squeeging out in there. I'm really kind of working it around, trying to release as much juice as possible because I think ultimately, like it says, that's supposed to cover everything. I think it might if I just left it for a while too, because salt releases liquid from stuff. And I'm just like pressing down with my thumbs. Ultimately, maybe we'll end up with enough room for 1 more lemon, so I might go grab another one. It says, press the lemons down to release their juices, add to the jar the peppercorns and bay leaves. So I'm going to do that now before I go get my extra lemon. Added quite a healthy bit of peppercorns, almost a tablespoon. And then the bay leaf, I'm going to try to like shove it in the side because I think that'll just look the best. Like kind of put it vertically down one side. I might just use 1 because I'm, like I said, kind of reducing the recipe overall. Oh yeah, down one side, looks nice. It's kind of getting crumbled up. Oh well, that's okay. And it's interesting, a lot of the salt is settling to the bottom. I think it'll kind of slowly digest, and I think it'll just end up being brine at a certain point. I'm going to go get a lemon. I'll be right back. All right, I scrubbed up another lemon. Do it again. I don't know if I'm supposed to, I would assume I'm supposed to also put salt on the sections of this lemon. And I'm going to. Again, recomposing it and then kind of shoving it down in there. And yeah, by now the juice is really getting towards the top when I press down. The jar is almost full. Peppercorns are floating around towards the top. And that's it. Screwing the top on. And then, as it says, let ripen at cool room temperature, shaking the jar every day for 3 to 4 weeks, or until the rinds are tender to the bite. And you'll kind of, in my previous vicarious preserved lemon experience when Haley made the Buddha's hands, you'll kind of see the preserved lemons get the rinds, they just take on kind of a different kind of quality, it's like they're being consumed by the brine, and they almost take on it's not exactly jelly-like. It's very specific. It's kind of hard to describe. They almost start to look a little translucent, I guess would be the best way I can put it. It says to remove a piece of lemon and rinse it. Add more fresh lemons to the brine as you use the jar up. That's a cool idea. And so you can kind of have perpetual preserved lemons. I like that. And it says the minced rind is added at the very end of cooking or used raw, and the pulp can be added to a simmering pot. My favorite application of this, Canal House chicken thighs, that one you actually stir them in while cooking. You stir up some chopped pieces of the rind. But I think that's one of the things that makes it such a fun ingredient, is clearly you can kind of get creative with it. And it looks really cool, and I just like having something in the kitchen that I kind of have to come in and poke around with every day for a while, and that's exactly what I have here. And then the fun thing about it is, let's say, okay, so I make this today, so I give it to somebody, in a little bit here over the holidays, and then they have, it's something that you might not, everything else has to get eaten up somewhat quickly, and this is going to be, it's going to be around for a while. You can still have this, after everything else is gone. It's like, this will stick around for a while. You can use it right away, or you can use it later. So that's it. That's preserved lemon. And this is my conversation with the great Nikki Palumbo. Well, Nikki Palumbo, thank you so much for joining me. Unfortunately, obviously, we cannot share a real meal in physical space right now, so all I can do is hope that whatever you ate last was both delicious and satisfying.
Great. I was like, what did I eat last? In order, yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so sorry I made you reschedule a bunch. But you could not have been more accommodating in a time when time does not exist, at least in my mind.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing, right? Is like that would require me holding up a completely unrealistic level.
Sure.
Well, I mean, I can't. I look at my day planner is freaking slammed and whatever.
You're like, I've never seen blanker space. It's yes. Like, yeah, let's resketch.
Exactly. And yet it still feels like the end of the day comes very quickly. You know what does that make sense?
100%. Like the fact that it's like, it's 4:30 where I am, and I'm like, what's a reasonable time to like call it quits on the day? An hour from now? Because the sun's going to bed, so I should probably too, just to get this day over with. But I will say I can't remember what I ate last. I think I had breakfast.
Nice.
But like late, so brunch, I think some people call it. And it was delicious because I did not cook it.
What did you have, and who cooked it?
So yeah, I do love that you asked me to join you on this podcast, because I am not the chef in my family or my relationship or any household I live in. My partner Taylor is honestly, like, it's like it does make me feel really guilty often because not only does she cook most of our food, I try to contribute and she like usually shoos me out of the kitchen. But she like cooks like bizarrely well, like her father's a chef. So I feel like double guilt when I'm like, oh, like this is another perfect meal and I'll get seamless next time. And she made a beautiful kind of just like vegan like breakfast spread. We've been like burning through. I don't know if you've had it. It's like just egg. It's like an egg alternative, like plant-based, that you can seemingly only spend $20 on at Whole Foods. That's the only price and location it comes in. um, and so we had that, and oh no, I did contribute. Actually, I should give myself more credit. I cooked like Beyond sausage patties. So that was my contribution. They come frozen, and I just had to not burn them. So that was my addition. And then she made some kind of like avocado like smash that like she never tells me what's in it, but it's like always perfect. I think it's like some secret like lemon dill combination. So
Ooh,
yeah, we had like a nice little like breakfast plate.
yum. That
Um,
sounds fantastic.
yeah,
I think it's interesting that your impulse is like the narrative of being the one that doesn't cook in the relationship or in general is so internalized that you were like, I didn't have anything to do with it. And then
that's
and then you
that's
realize like, oh
exactly
no, I
right.
totally did. I
uh,
cooked one out of three things.
yeah, that's it's really funny. In October, I went to what I and two of my friends called an adult sleepover, because who does that, especially in a pandemic? Um, we were like, let's have an adult sleepover. Like it's our little like bubble. And so it was the three of us, and it was the most wholesome night. And we ended up making like vision boards, and so just like flipping through magazines. Like one was like a Bon Appetit magazine. Most of them were actually like food. I think one was like a wedding magazine, and I was like, all right, this is a lot of like pressure from the universe. Um, but I think from like one of like the food magazines, I cut out the phrase cook once, and I do think it was part of a recipe, but I was like, this needs to go on my vision board. Like I need to like cook once. I need to like bite the bullet because I'm not like it feels like you're right. I do tell myself like this story where I'm like, I'm not the cook in my relationship. Because we both believe that, honestly. I'm
Do you
like,
feel some, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, no. I was like I can't even like uh say I qualify as like some kind of like sous chef. Like I do nothing.
But it sounds, but that's very interesting I don't know. It's just is, one of the things that I like wanted to do with this podcast is just kind of like, I don't know. I think cooking can be viewed, obviously, like is what it is, but also can be kind of like a metaphor for like people's creative process. Or I know for me, like when I first started doing it, I really just thought of myself as like, I don't cook. I never have, I never
Hmm.
will. And yet it's shocking to me. I sort of date actually starting to cook in a real way around like, I don't know, like maybe like 7, 8 years ago at this point. But then I will somewhat often be like, oh, and then I made that thing. And Haley will be like, oh, yeah, that was and it was like before that, like when we were like first dating, before I really thought of myself
Got
as
it.
somebody who cooked. And it is interesting how much it's like my brain just goes like, I started here and I did it this. And that's when I became this person, and the power of being like, I wasn't this person. And then I became this person is very like, I don't know. It looms large, it seems like. And it sounds like that's the case for you as well. In your like, in your self identity. Do you have that as well with other things in your life? Are you like, oh yeah, I started stand up in whenever. And then you think back on it, you're like, wait a minute, I actually tried 5 years. Like there's this other time that I wish I could forget.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like I think unfortunately, like the amount of time I've spent on the internet, I think of like things in my life almost like I'm reading them on a Wikipedia page. And I'm like, on March 2nd, 2018, Nikki tried to help in the kitchen and she cut herself with a knife. So she it took her another year to get back in there. That's like I think the date's wrong, but like the vibe of that is correct. I've cut myself so many times with knives. It's like it's like my kryptonite. Like I just don't don't remember that they're sharp. Like I just don't know what's happening. Um, but yeah, I do think I like really like compartmentalize and like think of certain timelines. Like there's absolutely like a date in my mind where I'm like, and that's the date I started comedy. And it's like, no, that's probably not true. That's just like a memorable like moment. Um, which that good. Like I'm glad I remember something because time really feels like it like bleeds together like my little cut hands. Um, but I do specifically remember the worst time I've ever cut myself in the kitchen. I was like moving out of my college apartment and I was just like cleaning things before I packed them up and I just held the knife in an absolutely incorrect way and tried to like wash it with a sponge and I looked down and I was like, that's bone, baby.
Oh
Um,
no. Oh my
and
God.
yeah, I was shocked and I immediately started laughing because I was like, of course, this is what I've done. Um, I was like, well, that's it. I'll never touch a knife again. It's like the perfect like trauma bond of like, well, I can't cook because this is my nemesis. And yeah, like luckily I lived like down the street from a hospital, so I just like walked my little bleeding ass to the ER, and I was like, "This is bad. Fix, please." Um, yeah, it's kind of insane. I was like, when was the first time I cut myself with a knife? It's like I was 5 or 6 trying to open a Pez dispenser with a knife. Um, and my mom tells a story of just like following a trail of little droplets up into my room, and I was happily eating candy, but I was bleeding like profusely from my thumb.
Wait, so was the Pez,
Um,
were you just trying to get the Pez out of the Pez dispenser?
I
Like,
was
or
trying
was it
to,
like,
so it must have been like around Easter because I think it was like some kind of like Easter like basket that my mom like probably elaborately put together and didn't think to take the candy out of like the wrapping. And I think I was like, yeah, like 5 or 6, maybe not even that old. And I knew what scissors were, but the knife was the first thing I found. And yeah, I tried to like cut through like the plastic packaging around the Pez dispenser and used yeah, my finger as like a cutting board. And I like viscerally remember like being like taken to the hospital. Like my mom is a nurse, so she was like very calm, but I'm sure like panicked. Uh just being like, um I cannot believe this happened. I cannot believe I was out of the room for like 30 seconds. And it's like that's all it takes when I want candy. Um and I yeah remember like having to be like cocooned so that they could like stitch my finger, and luckily that wasn't my same experience in college, but I was like I I remember sitting there and I was like, well, I hope I don't wriggle. I don't know, I haven't gotten stitches in a really long time. um but those are my kitchen memories.
I mean, yeah, I think there's a reason that those would stick out for sure. That
Yeah,
your
sure,
brain
sure,
would
sure,
like
sure.
that, like the caveman part of your brain would be like, yeah, we're gonna want to remember that. That's gonna want to shape our
Right.
idea about this. So
Right.
like
I walk into
this,
that, yeah, I walk into the room and I'm like, I know I have a reason to be anxious.
yeah. I mean, that is. It, I mean, first of all, I feel like I still have that thing of being like, I know I could take approximately 15 more seconds and go get the correct tool for whatever this job is, but for whatever reason there's
Totally.
some sort of just like animal impulse that's just like, I want this, I'm just going to smash whatever this is on a rock until it opens,
Yes.
especially with that like clamshell packaging for whatever reason is
Hmm.
just perpetually sort of like, yeah, I shouldn't like try to open this, whatever clamshell packaging that has like, I don't know, some sort of like AA battery recharger or something. I'm not even sure why I bought in it. And I'm right by the drawer with the scissors, the sharp scissors in it, but instead I'm going to try to open it with my keys.
Right.
Like,
yep.
why
Your
is that a
keys are
thing?
game. Your teeth are game. And I'm like, wow, my teeth are way more expensive than anything I own. It just
Yeah,
seems
or it's
like,
like, I feel it feels the same way like when you're trying to lift something and you sort of know intellectually, especially as you get like, as you're literally not 18 anymore, you're like, I know I'm supposed to lift with my legs, but it's going to take me 1 second to figure out what the mechanics of that look like. So
yep.
let me just do it with my back, but really fast. That'll help.
That's the secret that everybody who hurts their back doing it didn't think. They're like,
Yes.
oh, you forget that it's like a magic trick where you just have to like rip the tablecloth off really fast. And it's like, oh, I'll just lift this thing that I have no business carrying,
Yeah,
but
I think that
fast.
exactly. And also it's like anytime I had like a couple year period where I was going to physical therapy for like a shoulder injury, and you would just overhear like other people in the sort of like little quasi physical therapy gym that were working with other physical therapists. And they would be like, oh yeah, all of the stories are just like, yeah, I was doing like it's just the smallest little shit. And then it's like, and then I just like felt a twinge, and now I come here twice a week for the past 4 years.
Right. I think that's so funny. My sister is actually a physical therapist. She lives in Seattle, like now, and has I think it's been like 5 or 6 years now. But we're originally from New Jersey, and she said part of the reason she moved to Seattle, she was like, "Well, the injuries I treat are just way more interesting." She was like,
Ah.
"It's a lot of people who have like fallen down Mount Rainier." Or like have done like some like awesome like kayaking or whatever. And she was like, yeah, most people I was treating in New Jersey like just sat at their desk for too long and then got up weird. And she was like, how many times am I gonna have to treat you for like your bum knee? Like it's like, just stop skipping steps.
So she was dealing with straight up like Grey's Anatomy injuries, because which also takes place
Yeah,
in Seattle, and Haley and I, that was a pandemic activity, as we watched like the
got
first
it.
seasons of Grey's Anatomy, and she'd already seen it, but they clearly were like, you can really feel the degree to which they just like picked Seattle out of a hat at the beginning, and then they were like, and then clearly like the costume designer was like, ooh, people wear a lot of layers, and like you can just see them being like, what's the Seattle version of this? And that is a big thing, is a lot of like adventure sports like kayaking or a bear bit me injuries.
Right.
Or I got scalded by this espresso machine.
Right. Because, well, coffee is huge also. That's so funny. Yeah, I think it just like really makes her day more interesting. And
Oh, I'm sure.
I always feel guilty when I'm like, hey, so at my desk job, I think I stood up too weird, and can you fix my lower back?
That must be frustrating as a physical therapist, just knowing with such a certainty, like everything that the ways in which we've structured our society and the ways in which we spend our days are just like fundamentally wrong for our who we are. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like our
Yeah.
physical selves. It's just like, we're not supposed to be doing that. We're supposed to be like laying in wait for a gazelle and then springing
Right.
out and chasing it across the whatever.
I think yeah, I'm sure it must be like so frustrating to be like, but I know exactly how the body works and nobody's using it right. And it's like,
I
yeah, that's
know. Oh
crazy.
God, that would
It's
be
like,
infuriating. It'd be
like
like being an
knowing how,
IT
yeah,
person, but for the human body.
exactly. It's like, all right, but yeah, I guess you could use a car like that, but what are you doing? Like, you're gonna ruin it. And it's like, all right, well, sorry, they built toilets, and I know that's bad for how we're supposed to squat, but like, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not going to be the weirdo that like starts using a hole again. Like, I'm just not New York. Like, I'm not going to I'm not going to be the first person to break the seal on that.
New York, no, but LA, I think somebody could make that work. Like, I think
I'm
there could be something where it's sort of like, yeah, it's like a lot of people that are like in the comedy scene and like are like actors are like they just don't have a lot to fill their days, so they go to this like gym like 10 times a week, and then they've
sure.
all started shitting in holes.
Gotcha.
There's like
You're like,
this.
oh, where else would I go? They serve this smoothie that is really fibrous, and then I don't have time to get anywhere else, so I have to go to the hole.
Yeah, there's a couple of really great holes in Echo Park right now that people are really loving. And I know it sounds sort of like woo woo, you know, whatever, but like it's really, once you've done it, like you get it, you know?
That's so funny.
Do you think, speaking of your sister being a physical therapist, I was just
Sure.
remembering like when I was in that period of doing physical therapy, and you could just feel the degree to which there was like frustration amongst
Hmm.
the physical therapists of like, yeah, it's like fucking, we tell people what to do and then they just like don't do it. Like we tell them like, you take this band home, and then just, you can even be sitting in front of the TV. You just got to do this thing 5 times and do this thing 10 times and do that like 3 nights a week. And this thing will get better and you won't have to come here anymore. And then your job won't be mad at us because you're like taking all of this money from their insurance or whatever.
Hmm.
And people, just myself 1,000,000% included, just don't do it. And I was just thinking like, do you think, who is more frustrated? Dentists that people don't floss,
Oh
or
gosh.
physical therapists that people don't do their little like squeeze a ball while you're watching The Voice?
Oh man, that's yeah, I'm sure that there's like such like an equal frustration there. I I feel like I think and talk about my teeth a lot for some strange reason. Like I think like it's just like a big thing. Like my parents are into like dental hygiene, but they like somehow are always going to the dentist. And I'm like, all right, I think you're lying to me about like how good like the genetics and like our teeth are. Like I'm like just waiting for mine to fall out.
It sounds like
But it
the teeth equivalent of like people that get their car washed a lot. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Where it's just
yeah,
sort of like, oh yeah, they're the people that are just like, yeah, you got to get your car washed every 2 weeks. And you're like, A, your car looks great, but B, what?
right.
I would never do that.
Right. It's like who's noticing other than you? And it's like me. Oh, all right. Then if you care about it, go for it. Who am I to
Sorry,
like
you were
yuck
saying.
somebody's yum? But yeah, like in the last week, I've talked to my mom like maybe 3 or 4 times, and almost every time she's like, "Sorry, I can't talk now. I got to go to the dentist," or it's like, "Sorry, I was just at the dentist." I'm like, "What's going on?" But like as somebody who I also care about like dental hygiene, and I cannot tell you how I maybe floss once a month if I'm lucky, and like the amount of blood that like comes out of my gums, I'm like, no, this just is not worth it. Actually, this is painful, and no, thank you. Um, and I know that's a problem very long term, maybe even short term. But talking to my sister as a physical therapist, I do feel like that's probably like a very similar frustration. Um, Taylor, my partner, we were like cleaning our apartment one day, and she just turned weird and got like the craziest like back spasm. So much so like the next day she could not get out of bed. Like we had to like figure out how to carry her. It was like a weird carry slash crawl to the bathroom. And I was like, wow, I really thought we like jumped through all of like the relationship hoops, but like here we are. And I had to like very frantically like reach out to my sister, and I was like, her back is broken or something is crazy is happening, and she was great. I was like, I love being able to exploit you for like free medical advice, um for all of like the essays I've had to proofread for you. It feels fair. And so she sent a bunch of exercises, and I will say, like, to Taylor's credit, she does them almost every day. And every so often, my sister will be like, "How's Taylor's back?" I was like, "I guess still bad because it's like a chronic injury at this point, but she's stretching." And she's like, "Good for her." I'm like, "All right, but what fixes it actually?" What fixes her back though? Um,
I
yeah,
think you
I
just
don't
blew the
know.
lid off of the physical therapy industry. They're
All
just
right,
like,
well,
keep
oh, my
it.
sister's gonna kill
They're
me.
just like, just treat it. Don't cure it. We actually know the thing that if we
Right,
just pressed this exact vertebrae like a
right,
little to the right, it would just be like, oh wow, it's fine. But
right.
they
It's like
don't want
the
you to know that.
control alt delete of like spinal health, and they're like, but why would we do that when? Oh man. Yeah, I'm sure it's really frustrating to be like, can you just touch your toes 10 times every morning and you'll be okay or close enough? And it's like, yeah, I could, but that's my soup time. So I'm not
Yes.
gonna give up soup.
Which, and that is an unconventional soup time, I will say, but every different strokes, you know, 100%. But that must be, I don't know, that just must be so, that just must, I'm saying this as somebody that has been that person who didn't do the exercises. And I'm just going like, that must be so frustrating. But then in fairness to just like people, to like the rest of us, it's like, yeah, but then I would have to, if I really am going to do it and get in the habit of doing it, that means I'm going to have to do it like, I don't know what it is. It's like 14 or 21 days. And there's like some, you know, like Malcolm Gladwell, the tipping point,
Sure.
like number for
For
like how
sure.
many days you're supposed to, before it becomes a habit or whatever. And it's like, I'm going to have to consciously do a new thing that I don't particularly like doing, or maybe even is like a little bit painful for
Hmm.
like, I'm going to have to choose to do it and remember to do it and find time to do it for like 14 days or 21 days in a row before it becomes a thing that I just do. That's
Yeah.
hard. Maybe
That's
I sound impossibly lazy and entitled, but I'm
but
just
that feels
like,
like such a big ask. Like especially like I think you really hit it on the head. It's like it's uncomfortable. There might be pain. It's like we are like kings and queens of self-preservation. Why would I choose to do something I know that is like maybe I'll see like results long term, but like in the now, ouch. Like no thank you. 20
yeah,
21
exactly.
times in a row, no thank you.
Yes. I think they just need to be like, okay, I'm giving you prescription NDMA. You get to do half of one of these and then do your thingy. We would be like, in 3 days, I was locked in.
Right. It's like
And
I
then by the end of
actually
it,
yeah.
my brain was not able to naturally produce endorphins anymore.
Right. It's like I did it 21 hours in a row. Is that what you said? And it's like, no. Uh,
I did it 21 hours in a row. And then I ended up in Connecticut for some reason on somebody's farm where they do metalworking.
yeah, I guess, yeah, I do feel better.
If you, now that I think about it.
Right.
So who did you see growing up? Who did you see cooking around you?
Incredible question. I was talking to my sister this morning and we were kind of like comparing Thanksgiving stories, like how hers went, how mine went. And so our mom's cooking had to come up. My mom is queen of the microwave. We call her cooking style nuking. Um, like I don't think I was aware food could have a taste in our house until I was like 16 or 17 years old. Like I just it was like the most steamed, tasteless broccoli. My mom loves cooking everything well done. So I ate steak that was rubber. I remember my sister and I got into like a food fight uh, at our kitchen table, and like the way the food stuck to the wall, I was like, I don't think that should be in our bodies, actually. Um, I think actually we've done ourselves a favor by launching it away from our our bodies. Yeah, it was like I love my mother. That is the caveat. I think she tried her absolute best. I think she came from like a house that wasn't huge into cooking. So she was like, "Well, I work. I have kids. I'm gonna do the best I can." And that was like so much just microwaved food, or like she'd like buy like a rotisserie chicken from the supermarket and then pop it in the oven to like crisp it back up, which like inevitably made it inedible. It's just like, hey, how long have you been chewing? Because this is my first bite and I'm tired. I have homework I actually have to get to. I would love dinner to be over. um, but like the real chef in our family is like she is now 93 years old. She's my like Italian nana. Um, all of my favorite foods come from her house. She was like the biggest like food influence. I think it's like why I'm like uh bizarrely connected to like Italian food, because I was like, oh, this is the only good food I eat. um I'm like, oh yeah, like you haven't lived until you've had like Nana's cavatelli, and it's like she just like rolls it with her little like arthritic hands at her kitchen table. It's my favorite meal. Not enough to learn how to make it myself. I'm like, what am I waiting for? She's 93. But yeah, she's like the queen of like the kitchen. Um, and that was like where we had, I feel, all of our like best meals was going over grandma's, which luckily was only 10 minutes away. My parents weren't big into moving away from their families because, well, generations. And it was like 10 minutes either way. We're at a grandparent's house. And one had good food and one had soda. And that was good enough. And that was good enough a lot of the time.
Not always correlated.
Yeah. Uh, one had like amazing like homemade sausage, and one had root beer I could have anytime I wanted. So real tough call when I was like 8 or 9.
I had the unique misfortune of having, not misfortune, just quirk of
Hmm.
the unlimited soda grandma was also the grandma that started and ran a small health food store in
Oh my
rural
gosh.
Arizona. So all of the soda was like, did you ever have like Blue Sky, or there were a couple of different, I'm assuming they're still around, but like, I
Hmm.
feel like they were very ahead of their time, sort of like pre LaCroix. They had like sugar in them, but it was like, it was just sort of like naturally flavored, a whisper of cherry, not very, it was all like, it
Got
was
it.
not exactly health soda, but I think that was what it was trying to pass itself off as.
Right. It
But
was
it
like
wasn't
aspirationally healthy. Yes. It was like, well,
precisely.
but it's not just brown, so it's better.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But it was like, it was like pre-organic, but it was like natural.
Got it. I don't think I've ever had a natural soda.
They're fine. They're
Yeah,
okay.
that
I
sounds
think they've
right.
now
Yeah.
figured out sometimes you'll get like a restaurant that's like that has like a soda fountain now that has like, we don't have Coke. We have like, I can't even think of what they're called, but there's some like a little slightly more kind of artisanal sodas where it'll be like with natural cane sugar, and it's just
Got
like
it.
cola. And that's like the closest, but I think they've figured out how to actually make it taste like good.
Right, where it's
We've
like,
come so
oh,
far.
yeah, we don't need to put cocaine in this for you to enjoy it. It's like, no, we've figured out our little flavor palette.
I do like imagining the one little soda company in America, like bottling company, that still has an unexpired license. They are like, we got the last license to put cocaine in the soda,
That's
and
so
we get to
funny.
do it. There's a carve out. We were grandfathered in.
It's like you somehow we still can't get it to like leave the shelves because it has a weird name, and it's like, but there's cocaine in it. Uh,
We're prohibited from acknowledging or advertising the fact, but it's there. Like, it's fucking there.
right?
Just buy it, please. We
Just
can't do
believe
all
us.
this cocaine ourselves. Yes.
We've tried. We've
Just
absolutely
fucking
tried.
believe us.
We have warehouses full. Help us. I just keep
But
coming
now
up with ideas for apps.
cavatelli is
Weirdly, they're all about making more soda.
I do like the idea that like cocaine, it gave people ideas for apps, but most of them were before apps were a thing. Like that was
Right,
when it
right,
was at its
right.
height, and people were just like, I'm envisioning something, it's on the thing, and there's candies and they're moving around and they disappear, but I don't know. I'm envisioning something, it's on like a little square, but I don't know what the square is. Okay, we just got to figure out what the square is. Let's do more cocaine. And then they're in Connecticut, upstate. They just found
Of
themselves
course.
there. It's 10 in the morning.
Of course.
But now cavatelli is which one is that? Is that like a fully rolled one, or is it like kind of quasi rolled?
Yeah,
What pasta shape is that?
I think when I've had it outside of my nana's house, it seems like it's like um mostly rolled, and sometimes it'll like hook a little like cheese or whatever is like happening in the dish. But the way she makes them is like fully rolled, and
Mm.
they do look really homemade. But they're like my favorite. I don't know what she does. My sisters tried to learn, and even hers like don't come anywhere near Nana's, and I'm like, but you watched her do it. Like, what happened? Yeah, they're like little short, like and stout, like yeah, like mostly rolled noodles. I don't know how else to like describe them.
Do you think that Nana knows something that she's not willing to part with yet? Like when she teaches your sister, is she like leaving out one critical? She's like, I
I
want people to keep coming back to Nana's house.
I guarantee that's what's happening because again, she's 93. I'm almost 33. I've known this woman my whole life. And uh in the past like year or two, she's told me stories that she says like they're just like part of like the fabric of who she is. And I'm like, I've never heard that story before. So you're absolutely leaving out steps in your recipe.
Like
It's
what?
like,
What is she? I mean, insofar as you can say,
sure,
we don't want to implicate
she
her in any ongoing investigations, but like
no, no, no.
what about what stories have like changed your image of her?
Sure. Yeah, I think the statute of limitations has expired for most of these things. But no, the last time I saw her was a couple months ago. And so her kind of like legacy is that she has two birthdays. She was born, I think, on like the 28th of October, whatever year the math says is 93 years ago. And she was like, but by the time they like filed the birth with like the town, her birth certificate said, I think like the 31st. And I was like, okay, cute, Halloween birthday. So she gets two birthdays every year. But the last time I saw her, she was like, well, they burnt down like the clerk's office. She was like, because of the war. And I was like, wait a minute. Like World War I just rolled through your town and like burnt down important buildings. She was like, yeah. And I was like, all right. What? I was like, how have you just been sitting on this? But like, we all thought it was like a cute little story that like, yeah, and they couldn't like get to the clerk on time. So 3 days later, they were like, ah, close enough. And she's like, no, 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 they had it on file. And there was just, we lost all of those records because of the war. And I was like, all right, you've lived a much harder life than I thought.
Was this also in New Jersey?
No, this was in Italy.
Oh wow.
Sorry,
Okay.
I was very unclear.
I was like, I was
Could
just
you
struggling to
imagine?
figure out
You're
which
like,
world war would have, or which even just American conflict in the 20th century would have
uh,
burnt down a clerk's office in New
that's
Jersey.
so funny. You're like, Nikki, look, you're saying this with so much confidence, but I think your Nana has lost her mind. You're like, I just
Wow. Oh, that's
don't
so
think it.
interesting.
Yeah, it was like her small little village in Italy that I've been to one time. I was 12, and I have no problem admitting it was the most boring vacation I've ever been on because what's there to do on a farm? Um, I watched chickens disappear because they became dinner, and I was like, I don't like it here, actually. I was like, every time I make a friend with somebody outside, we get served that for dinner, and I'm not a fan.
It's like, I think the woman who works in the kitchen thinks that I'm selecting these like a lobster.
Right,
Like, I'll have this one. That's
right,
what she's doing when she's like going up to it and nuzzling it and naming
right.
it.
It's like, no, I'm just trying to give it a name because I thought like we connected, and now, yeah, it was delicious because I loved it.
These are hard lessons to learn.
Yeah, I haven't been back since. Not to that village. I've been back to Italy, but I was like, stay clear of San Bartolomeo.
They had my stepmom is Italian, and her parents both grew up here, but she like tracked down like, oh, this is, my dad's never been back to Italy, and this is the village that like his parents were from. And so when I was in high school, we like went to Italy, and she like brought them over, and it was this big culmination of like something that she'd always wanted to do for her parents. And I think they really enjoyed it in general. I think more in a just sort of like general it's cool to go to Italy as a tourist because it's
Sure.
really interesting and it's fun to
Yeah.
go on trips sense. But there was one day where it was like, okay, we're mostly just doing like the big tourist stuff and we're going to the Vatican and we're going to Florence and this different thing. And she's like, okay, but one day we're going to take a bus out to the village where my grandpa's family is from. And I think it's called, and I'm probably going to screw the name up, like Ascoli Piceno. And so we take a bus out and we like transfer to a different bus, and the bus like stops at a certain point at like a truck stop. But because it's Italy, it was still like the best food I've ever had was like at the truck stop where the bus stopped. Yep. And then we like finally, it's like a kind of a hot day and we get out at this sort of little kind of like dusty kind of like bus station in this town. And my grandpa like gets off the bus and just as I remember it, this is an oversimplification, but basically just kind of like looked around and was like, yep. And then we like got off on the bus and like went back.
Yeah.
It was just sort of like I think we're all expecting a sort of like, and then he falls to his knees, sort of like end of Saving Private Ryan. Right. You know, moment. And it was more just like, it's a town. Well, let's go back.
Yeah. Like there is such like a romantic, like, yeah, like very like, oh, we've seen it in movies, like cinematic view of like just like beautiful Italian towns. And it's like, oh, this is where I'm going to fall in love. I'm going to see a boy, not me, across the piazza, and it's like sparks. And it's like, no, it's okay. There's one restaurant. That's the one place that maybe makes coffee, but it is the bar. And it's like, and there's the hotel, which is just an extra room in this person's house. And like, that is so much of like Italian countryside, which like now I appreciate. And I'm like, oh, now I would go back. But like as a 12, like 13-year-old, I was like, this is boring. I don't have enough CDs like to make this interesting. Do you know how many times I've listened to Dirty Pop by NSYNC? It's like, I'm sick of it. Like, can we go back to like, I don't know, like Lizzie McGuire Rome? Like, let's make this interesting for me.
Did Lizzie McGuire go to Rome?
I do think that was like the movie. I could be misremembering it. Maybe that's like an episode I wish happened. But I do think that's like part of the Lizzie McGuire canon. She ends up in Italy at some point.
She was the original Emily in Paris, if you really think about it. Was Lizzie McGuire in Rome. It didn't quite roll off the tongue in the same way, but she was there.
Also, I love that you I guess correctly said the show title, because I had no idea it was supposed to rhyme.
Well, only because I like a lot of us was chastened by Netflix's corporate social media account. Had a very snarky sort of like, actually guys, it's pronounced whatever. Where you're just like, I don't know, then have somebody, have a narrator come on at the beginning of the show and just read the title as it comes on screen. So that my
favorite thing to do when I'm watching anything is like wait for like somebody to say the title. Like, I think that's just so like, I enjoy it. It's like, go ahead, say the title. Like, I want to know. I want to hear somebody say Inglourious Bastards. I want to hear somebody say Mean Girls. Like, make it happen. Say girl, interrupt it. Like, say something. Nobody has ever said it like that. But it's like, then have somebody say, oh, Emily in Paris. How quaint. How apropos. But nothing. We got nothing. It's like, no, you can't retroactively tell me what this was supposed to be. I've already watched it. We all watched it in one day, and I've moved on. And now we're all on to the Queen's Gambit. Please don't tell me that's supposed to rhyme.
The Queen's Gambit, and you're like, wait, but that doesn't rhyme with the first part. And they're like, we know, we're trying, okay?
That sounds like it needs like a record scratch at the end. The Queen's Gambit, and it's like whatever the remix of it is.
Not enough record scratches in trailers anymore.
No, and I miss it.
It used to be like I feel like it would always, every 90s movie, I'm not the first person to make this observation, but it would sort of, I feel like it was always like the first part of the trailer was literally like, for whatever the content was scored with like, dun 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 dun, and then
classic
record scratch,
music.
And then it would be like, Wild Thing by Tone Loc.
Right. And it's like, oh, that's how they'll be changed forever. Got it.
That's really all you need to know about storytelling is
Right.
the first part, your character is Rites of Spring, and then the second part,
Uh,
they're Wild Thing by Tone Loc. And that
yeah.
is it's just Joseph Campbell. It's just the Greeks. That's really, when you break it down, that's all
Uh,
it is.
Man, it's hard knowing how the sausage is made. Uh,
But it's either that, or either you know how the sausage is made, or you know how the soda is purchased at your other grandparents' house.
right, right, right.
Those are your options.
Incredible way to circle back.
So, is there? You said that your Nona's cooking has given you like a bizarre connection to Italian food. How has that like manifested itself outside of literally going to her house? Do you just have like an incredibly high standard for it, or you just crave it in any form, or like how has that taken life in your life?
Yeah, so I do, well, weirdly, I do crave it, but I often only crave like her cooking. So I don't have a
Mm.
lot of Italian food out in like the wild. And I do feel like, yeah, I have like a really high bar that has been set. And it's like anybody else could like eat her food and they'd be like, yeah, this is fine. And it's like, sure, that's how like sense memories are born. And that's why I think this is perfect because I've had it, since I was a baby. Um, but even when I'm attempting to cook, it seems like everything I try to make is Italian in some way or like borrows from one of her recipes. Like for Thanksgiving, we had like a really small little gathering and Taylor made like this really elaborate like vegan loaf that was like very savory. It had all of like these like vegan versions of like Thanksgiving staples and I was like I want to do something too. I feel like I should make something. And I did like a vegan version of like Italian stuffed artichokes and I don't cook a lot. That was the kind of fulfillment of me being like, cook once, lady. And I was like, I did it. Thanksgiving, so soon. And they came out like really well because I just kind of used most of my nana's like recipe for how she makes them. And I just tried to Google how to swap out cheese, which is like sacrilegious in our family to not use cheese.
You're like, this computer shocked me for some reason when I
Right.
typed it in.
Yeah, it was like, "Do you mean cheese?" And it's like, "No, I don't. Can you not send this analytics report to my my family?" And so yeah, they came out like really well, but I was like, "Oh yeah, all I really try to make are versions of like these things I loved growing up." And most of that is Italian food. Again, probably because my mom microwaved every other food and I just don't have an appreciation for it.
But so what did you and forgive me if you already said and I just missed it,
No.
what did you end up swapping in, or how did that like manifest itself? Because it sounds like you were really happy with the result, or it came out good.
Yeah, it came out great. I made six of them. I think I ate five of them myself over like 3 days. They were the biggest artichokes I've ever seen. I was like, all right, somebody stop pumping steroids into like these crops. These are enormous. Um, yeah, I found a recipe online that I kind of tinkered with to, kind of follow my Nana's recipe on like how much of like Italian breadcrumbs to use. But it was basically instead of cheese, I put a bunch of cashews in a NutriBullet because that's what I had, and I pulsed it until it was like a meal, and then I mixed that in with I think it was just like nutritional yeast and like these breadcrumbs and some olive oil, and it made like it was actually a pretty disgusting paste before it was cooked. And then yeah, I stuffed that with like some lemon juice into these enormous Hulk artichokes, and like kind of shoved a little clove of garlic into all of them, and like that somehow tasted. As somebody who grew up eating the cheesy version, I was like, I am missing a little bit of the cheese, but it was so close. And then just like cooked those in or steamed them in a pot for like 80 minutes, and they were perfect. So yeah, I also love a dummy proof recipe where I'm like, I can't burn this, right?
But it doesn't sound, I don't know. I think you might want to give yourself more credit, because it doesn't sound dummy proof to me. It sounds like you were doing a lot of stuff. You were trying to adapt this recipe that is very sort of like close to your heart, but also, you know, make it vegan and do all these different things and kind of like, you know, use like creativity and research. And then you can absolutely over steam something. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like it's not just it's not a complete no-brainer. So that sounds great. I'm going to give you full credit for as just another, if you're not going to give yourself full credit as being somebody that cooks or whatever, I just, as another person outside of your own head, will say, good job. It sounds like you did great. And it turned out really good.
Thank you so much. I'm actually really happy I didn't know you could oversteam something before I did it. It's
I'm
kind of,
pretty
yeah,
sure you can, because I feel like it's just like heat and like moist air. So I feel like, you know, something could absolutely get over, you know, like just too, that's, I mean, essentially what you were describing with like, it sounds like stuff getting too microwaved when you were growing up. It's kind of like, that's probably a lot of times what was happening. I don't know. I'm not a super
no,
steam
you're
expert by
probably
any
right.
means.
You're probably right.
But so are you and Taylor both vegan? Do you guys just eat a lot of vegan food? How has it been like navigating that?
Yeah, she when we started dating, she was like fully vegan. She was like, you know, I'm trying this for a year to just see how I feel. And then after like that year, she was like, yeah, I feel incredible. I'm gonna I'm gonna keep doing this. So she's like fully cut out dairy, and every once in a while she'll have some fish. But like she's pretty strict about, yeah, like what she'll put in her body, and I don't have that same kind of discipline. But when she's cooking, it's I'll obviously eat vegan. I have it's insane to me how good vegan like junk food is. Like some of the best nachos I've ever had have been like vegan, and I'm like, this is honestly really impressive. This feels like a magic trick, and I don't know like if I'm the butt of the like this is delicious, and I don't miss, you know, kind of like the nacho staples. But yeah, she yeah, always is eating vegan, and I I don't know, maybe 65 to 70% vegan, but I do like, I love a burger, I love a chicken wing. Like it's really hard for me to like fully walk away.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from with that, where I'm like, I sort of, I mean, I know all of the arguments and I buy all the arguments. It doesn't like
Hmm.
offend me when I'm always surprised when people who do eat meat seem sort of like offended by people that don't eat meat. It's just sort of like, you know, what do you care?
Right.
Why does that bother you? But I haven't been able to take the leap. I would imagine maybe someday I could see myself being like vegetarian, and at a
Hmm.
certain point, maybe the choice will just get made for all of us because of
Right.
the planet
The
that we are
planet.
like in the process of completely trashing. But I don't know. Yeah, it's really interesting, but vegan cooking does fascinate me because some of the first people that I knew who were vegans were also some of the first people I knew that really like cooked a lot for themselves, because you kind of, maybe this is not as true anymore and it's just easier to get a lot of really good pre-made vegan stuff, but it does seem like you kind of, and then the more I've come to learn about sort of the like origin of like, you know, the health food movement and organic food movement in America and all that different stuff, it is like a lot of those, the people that were eating vegetarian and vegan in the 60s and 70s, a lot of it was them just having to be like, we literally have no other option. Like we have
Hmm.
to figure out how to make our own stuff because literally nobody else is doing it. And it's the post-war period. So the government is just trying to like, shovel a cow into everybody's
Right,
face
right.
every single day.
They're like, well, we got them.
We
So
we got them. And if you don't eat this cow, fucking the communists win, and so you got to
mhm.
do it. Um,
We've
but
eaten so much scared like beef. Like it's insane. That's the Red Scare. It's red meat scare. Like
oh,
that's exactly
that's
what
what
was
that
happening.
means.
That's what that
And then
means.
and then you're known as like, yep, that's exactly it. And then that and it was that, and then the Hall of Records burned down, and those were the two. That was the order of events.
And that's history. And
That's history, baby. 1900 to 2000. What can you do?
ah, Jesus.
But has any of that like rubbed off on you, or do you feel like there's a little like tips or tricks or things that you've picked up to be like, this is the secret thing that makes good vegan food versus just kind of like the cliche, pejorative, like caricature of vegan food?
Yeah, I will say like Taylor cooks with like a lot of like vegan butter, a lot of like vegan cheeses. So it is like I just think like the ingredients have gotten so close to what the American diet like has dictated we must crave. So I think like just like our scientists have never done better work than making food taste like food. And it's kind of incredible, and I'm sure there are like reasons why those things are unhealthy because it's like, all right, sure, we have like um plant-based meat now that bleeds like a burger patty, and it's like, but it has, I don't know, something like 5 times the amount of sodium. So it's like, all right, cool. The cholesterol won't kill me. It will be like just my constricted arteries because of how much salt is running through my veins. So it's just like a different evil, I'm sure, but it is so delicious. And it feels a little bit better in that you're like, well, an animal didn't like die cruelly. I'm the animal that will die. um, and eventually. Yeah, I don't know how they've gotten certain, yeah, like it's insane how many like burgers we eat that are vegan, and I'm like, I don't, it tastes so good. What's happening? Like what's the secret? Like is this just like some kind of like magic grease? Like I just don't get it. Um and I wish maybe I don't want to know. This I think where I'm falling. Where I'm like, nah, don't tell me.
It's entirely possible. I mean, it is interesting the amount of like, uh, just in that period in the like 50s and 60s where it was just sort of like all of the scientists that were done, or not all of the scientists, but some of the scientists that were done like figuring out bombs and stuff were like, now let's turn our attention to peaches or whatever.
Right. It's like some kind of
And
like Price is Right wheel, and they're like, "Oh,
yes, exactly.
this is our next project."
Yes, and then just like made stuff that like our parents' generation and then our generation, I think, being more sort of like Go-Gurt and shit. That then now I could imagine a world where it's sort of like, and so then people turned against that and were like, that's not natural. We should be eating more other stuff. And then in a weird way, in trying to get vegan food to taste like other stuff that it isn't, that we're getting
Right.
back to that in a weird place. But I genuinely don't know enough about, I mean, it sounds like with like the sodium content and stuff, that's like genuinely the first thing I've heard that I've been like, oh yeah, that doesn't sound great, but
Right.
I guess it just sort of, it's like you're saying, it's just different trade-offs, I guess. I just saw something yesterday that like they've grown like lab grown like chicken meat that is not like from a living animal is going to like start being sold like in Singapore, and supposedly it's like inexpensive and is fine, where I am genuinely just like, man, if that's at all good, like I'll take that. That's fine. I don't
Yeah.
need it to, like the thing for me when I'm eating chicken is not like, yeah, but was a consciousness extinguished so that this could
Right.
be in my mouth right now? Like, I don't need that to be a part of it. So yeah, great. Let's do it. Let's figure it out.
For sure.
I'm down.
Right. I do think there's like a part of me where I'm like, yeah, I'm not the one who's like actively like hunting or gathering my own food. So like I don't I don't need uh to know that there was like any kind of like, yeah, you just like watch the light go out in a pig's eyes. It's like I don't need that. So because I'm so far removed from it, it's like, right, how much better can I be? It's like, right, substitute it. I'll take the extra sodium if I can, not contribute, since I am doing so little of my own like food preparation.
But you're doing more than you think you are, and I think that's the takeaway here that I want for you, is that it sounds like you're doing more. It sounds like you go like, I'm doing like some, and then part of you like rounds that down to like, I'm doing none.
Yeah, and that's how I've been conditioned.
Sure. I think a lot of
Absolutely.
us feel that way about a lot of things, where it's just sort of
For
like,
sure.
well, I said I was going to write 5 pages of this thing today and I was going to do so much, and then I did two instead, and I spent more time on Twitter than I wanted to. So I'm not only I'm a piece of shit. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like,
You're like, and by this elaborate math equation I've devised in my own mind, I'm garbage and I shouldn't have done anything. Here, take my computer. And it's like,
yes,
oh, okay.
absolutely. And I think if there's one thing that it's sort of like, I can't remember if we were talking about this before we started recording or not, but just that feeling of sort of like, and then you look up and it's like, well, at least I like, can I just say that today is over so I can get to tomorrow? And I do think at a
Right.
certain level, it's like, and that's something that I've been struggling with, is like, even though this time period is a sort of weird, like transitional time at best, like if that's how life
Right.
is for you right now, and that's how life is for me, that's like a great, totally fine way for life to be right now for me. I genuinely have no complaints, but
Hmm.
like there is this, so I am trying to be like more present in, and just kind of be like, yeah, but even though it's during a pandemic and it's not exactly, life is not going on exactly as planned, that doesn't mean you should just sort of like Bruce Almighty style hit the like fast forward button on your own life. But that said, there is something to just like right now, it's just like, if you're just getting through the day, you get to tomorrow, it's fun. You didn't do
Hmm.
anything terrifically self-destructive to yourself or somebody else. Tight,
Yeah,
tight,
that's a that's a win. And like, how many of those can we say we are like, yeah, gather, like, I feel like just like a day where I didn't hurt anybody, like I did no harm to anybody else or myself. That's just another beautiful day of existence.
Yes, I did. I remember thinking a lot when like in like during the like 2016 election and after, when it was sort of like, it was just a lot of like fucking like the alt right, and there's these terrible little fucking like trolls who are just like mean little white kids who will just like
Hmm.
ruin your life over nothing, and they're just like hateful for no reason even though they've never
Yeah.
encountered any friction. I did remember thinking like, we don't give enough credit to the people who just don't do bad stuff. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Right. It's like you don't need to be like the full antithesis where you're doing like you're out like solving like all of the world's problems, but it's like you're not contributing to the bad, and that's kind of incredible these days.
yes, Haley and I were watching an episode of 90 Day Fiance. I can't remember. It was one of the spin-offs, but it was like, there was a guy on the show who was just literally, just seems like a sort of like normal straight guy in America from like
Hmm.
sort of the Midwest, I think. And he's in Colombia because he's dating this woman in Colombia. And he literally just said during a fight that they were having about like, he had cheated on her and then she maybe slept with somebody, but were they on a break? Were they not? Whatever. He literally just said like, okay, well, I need to take a break right now because I don't think I'm thinking very rationally. And I wanted to be like, get this guy a fucking parade. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if more of us were like, if that was the median person, was just somebody who was able to say that on a regular
Right.
basis or feel that, we'd be so much better off.
So I think so many people just like forget that that is an option to be like, hey, actually, quick pause because I can't make a decision right now. And I do feel like, well, for so many reasons, we are living in a reality where everything, like every decision, every thought feels like a choose your own adventure. And you're like, I got to pick a page. And it's like, no, actually, you don't. You can like pop that bookmark in, go take a walk. Like, you don't have to do it right now. And yeah, that's incredible. That, yeah, probably a man that I would blindly hate on the internet. It's like, honestly, kudos. Good for you. You were like very self-aware in that moment. That's amazing. I will applaud that. And how little is that to applaud?
Yes, I know. It shouldn't be, it should just be sort of the, like, I guess it's like that should be the bare minimum that we should expect of people. But for whatever reason, especially right now, I'm just like,
Yeah.
God damn, where's your statue,
Right. How do we get you a medal? Can we make one? Do we apply somewhere? Like, what do we have to, what do we have to do to, like, get you a monument?
Yeah. And I think there's a certain degree of just like, through the sort of just like, if you just got through the day and you didn't actively harm yourself or anyone else or whatever, and you're just sort of trying to do it. And not, I think even in a non-pandemic setting, it's like, I think we have to be willing to like give ourselves a little more props for that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Rather than having to be like, did I fucking move a full space on the game board of life and my goals today? And if I didn't, I'm for shit.
Right. Yeah. I do think that has been like kind of a lovely little silver lining to, again, like, I consider myself very fortunate. Like, I have been living a very like comfortable existence since the pandemic has started. But yeah, just a lot of like unlearning things I, have believed my whole life, where it's like, well, but if I'm not productive, what am I? And it's like, well, I'm a human being. I have other qualities, and we're just doing the best we can. And if that is nothing for a day, hey, that's still a tick mark.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, totally. I couldn't agree more. I wanna almost leave it there, but I have a final question for you, which is, if there was anything that maybe it was something that you used to eat all the time growing up, maybe it's something that your Nona makes that you feel like she hasn't fully shaken loose the actual details of, that she's holding on to for some reason, for like the highest bidder or something, whether it's maybe like something that you and Taylor ate in a restaurant once and just couldn't get over how good it was. If there's anything at all in the world that you could just snap your fingers and know how to make from scratch perfectly, what would it be?
Oh man. It is another Nana dish.
Awesome.
She makes this incredible like roast beef. I don't know any part of like how she makes it. From how she marinates it, how she cooks it. I don't know, like it's always like just like so flavorful. There's always like some kind of mushroom, like onion, like not like gravy like that, like accompanies it. The way she slices it is like it's almost like a deli meat, but it's not, because she cooks like a whole flank of meat. I have no idea how she makes it. I would love to know. And I'm like immediately like tossing my like, yeah, I eat 70% plant-based. I'm like, roast beef. Would love to know how to. I need it. And it's so good, and I feel like has no part to do with the recipe or anything, but my cousin couldn't pronounce it correctly when she was little, so she'd always call it roast beast. So there's part of me that is always like, I love Nana's roast beast. It's just she can roast the hell out of a beast. And that's like, yeah, that's it. It's so good.
Ooh, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, that does sound like, especially when you know something is so simple. I mean, it's one thing to be like, oh yeah, there's a fucking thing that they make at I don't know, 11 Madison Park in New York, and it's the most expensive thing ever, and they're clearly using 90 billion different super expensive ingredients and techniques. But when there's just that thing where you're like, there can't be that much in it. It's just,
it's
you know
so
what I mean?
simple.
That is
it's so
confounding.
Right, where you're like,
rules.
Surely I should be able to figure this out, and it's like, no, clearly not.
And there's just there's a nice Christmasliness to this. It's unexpectedly seasonal that it's roast beast,
Roast beast.
The Grinch, right? Did they had roast beast was that was a thing that he steals the roast beast from the Who's?
I think so. And if it's not, then I would love to see that in the next iteration of the Grinch.
We have enough Grinches. I don't know if we need
That's probably true.
Just in general, I did not even mean that to be a play on like society.
Right. But we are at critical mass on Grinches.
But I think that is a good place to leave it. You guys, don't be such a friggin' Grinch this holiday season, you know?
Couldn't be me.
What's that?
I said it couldn't be me. I refuse to volunteer as a Grinch.
that's good. I mean, it is like a Hunger Games thing. Somebody has to. That's what they don't want you to know about the backstory of the Grinch is that he had to like he didn't want to be that, but they were just like somebody's got to be it, and he was like, "Fuck, I'll live in a cave."
Right. And he's like, how will you know how much good is in the world unless you have a Grinch?
Wow. Oh my gosh. It's like, okay, you know what? I take it back. We don't have enough Grinches. Based off of what we just said, we need a new version of the Grinch where he's essentially Heath Ledger's the Joker from The Dark Knight. And he's like,
wow.
We need each other. We're like a yin yang. He didn't say we're like a yin yang. That would be like if the Joker worked at a store in the mall in the late 90s.
Just hanging out at dispensers.
Nikki Palumbo, thank you so much for joining me. I had the best time with you. I wish you and Taylor the best holiday season, and thank you for doing this. It was a hoot.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, happy holidays to you and Hallie.
All right, that is it. That is all for this week's episode of Stay for Dinner. Thank you so much to my guest, Nikki Palumbo. You can look her up. She's on Instagram at Nikki Pal, NIKKIPAL, and on Twitter at Nikki, NIKKIPALUMBEAU. Check me out at DC Pierson on Twitter and DEECEE Pierson on Instagram because all the good names were taken by the time I signed up like last year. If you like this show, please rate and subscribe it wherever you do that for podcasts. It helps people find the show, and that in turn helps there be more show. Tweet at me if you make stuff from the show. If you cook along at home, I would love to see what you make. And thank you to Jason Anderson, who made my intro song, which is July 4th, 2004, Advanced Bass. Thank you for the amazing Owen Ashworth. Sarah Beacon, Becan. Look up her work. She did my podcast art. And that's it. I think that's everything. Oh, yeah, right. I wrote 2 novels, The Boy Who Couldn't Sleep and Never Had To, and Crap Kingdom. Consider them as gifts if you have. One, The Boy Who Couldn't Sleep, skews a little bit older, and then the other one, Crap Kingdom, is a true blue young adult novel. Consider them as gifts for the people in your life who you think would like science fiction coming-of-age adventures or fantasy coming-of-age adventures that are humorous. They're available wherever fine books are sold. Please support your independent bookseller over this holiday season, and thank you for supporting me by listening to this show. Be back next week.